It's the biggest March ever. Big premieres, big families, and big surprises. This month on Disney Plus, stream blockbusters like West Side Story, Free Guy, and Disney's Encanto. As well as original movies and series like Olivia Rodrigo Driving Home to You, Cheaper by the Dozen, Pixar's Turning Red, and Marvel Studios' Moon Knight. All of these and more streaming this month on Disney Plus.
Moms and dads. Adventures in Collecting is about toys, but it might not be for your children, especially if you don't like words like f*** or sh** or hole.
Are you ready, kids? Get your parents' permission, check your mailbox, and grab your shopping cart. It's time for the Adventures in Collecting podcast.
I'm Erik.
And I'm Dave. Welcome to Adventures in Collecting, where we talk toy news, culture, and hauls,
along with our journeys as collectors.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Adventures in Collecting.
Hi. I was going to jump in with a hello, everybody, but I feel like I did that last time, didn't I? I don't remember.
You know, it's one of those things where, we just kind of have our... We've got our little flow here, Mm-hmm. And I like that you're ready to throw in a wild card.
Yeah,
now.
Maybe next time, everybody.
You'll just jump right. You know what though? What'll happen is, and we've gone over this. If we both do it at the same time, no one will be able to tell us apart.
It'll sound like stereo.
You'll be like, oh, why did they do a stereo mix on this?
Double that?
The ego on these two, they're doubling their intro now. Oh man. But Dave, we are reaching the end of kind of that toy fair season, the all of the announcements and stuff that have happened in place of toy fair. And we're starting to now approach, as we get into the spring, we're starting to approach the con season now. We're going straight into con season. And one of the cons that is happening soon is DKECON, and that has something to do with today's episode, doesn't it?
Erik, do me this huge favor that I'm going to ask of you. I'm going to ask sincerely and honestly that you do not bury the lead, because I feel like there was a clue in there that everyone needs to pick up on.
You're so polite that I'm going to do you that honor.
Oh, please.
And I'm not going to bury the lead, Dave. That's because today, of course, we do have another guest. So, Dov Kelemer and Sarah Jo Marks started DKE Toys nearly 15 years ago and grew the company into the largest independent wholesale distributor of designer toys, limited edition art objects, collectibles, and gifts before moving that arm of the business over to Dispersed. Today, DKE Toys continues to partner with the global toy community, showcasing independent toy artists at their quarterly DKE Con events. With one of those events coming up, like I mentioned at the top of the episode here, in just a couple weeks as of recording, it's happening at the end of March. Joining us on the pod is DKE co-founder Dov Kelemer. Dov, welcome to Adventures in Collecting.
Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. We're kind of, we kind of dipped our toes into the bootleg art toy community when we had Peter on Killer Bootlegs, and recently, for those of you that might be new listeners, we just had another toy artist on, Dollar Slice Bootlegs, John Pryor. So we're kind of getting into this whole art toy community and trying to go from dipping our toes to being kind of like experts. So we're really excited to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the support of the scene. I think the resin bootleg scene is, for those of you who don't know, is a group of artists whose medium, the way that they express themselves is action figure. And it's a fascinating time. It started in about 2004 with an artist named the Sucklord, and from there, what are we, like 16 years in? I mean, I have a database of about 200 to 300 different creators that are all making their own action figures by hand. They're either sculpting or kit bashing, casting, painting, designing card backs, graphic design or paintings, casting the figures, painting the figures, assembling and creating sometimes one-of-a-kind pieces, sometimes editions, and it's a fascinating. It's a fascinating time, because if you follow any of these artists and you follow any of what's going on, they're all just competing with one another and upping their game, and it's like sort of like month by month. It's like it's really an amazing time to be involved in this.
Yeah, it's an amazing world to watch, and to your point, there are so many artists now that are getting into it, and it's just fun to see how they do kind of push each other. One person innovates maybe some sort of painting method or articulation method or casting method, and then all of a sudden you see that kind of changes the scope of things, and other people start to push even further and further. So yeah, it is an absolutely fascinating time to be following this.
Yeah, and it's just fun to see too what gets produced, and just like heading into DKECON, just seeing kind of what's going to be available, and just all the different things that come from it.
It's my favorite aspect of the scene is the immediacy, like where someone will see something on the news and it will be an action figure, sometimes several hours later. And I remember the Mike Pence vice presidential debate and the Fly, right? There had to be like a half a dozen artists that within a day or two had their own Fly figure. And and there were some that just had plastic flies, and like made a card and put a plastic fly in a blister. And there's another guy, Edwin Salas, who carved them out of wood, and made his own. And then Medusa's Wild, she made a Baxter Stockman TMNT Fly figure. It was just like the creativity is it's just out of control, and the speed at which those images appeared on Instagram was just amazing to see. Now, years ago, there would have been a fight. There would have been a fight, like, oh, I'm the first one to do that. There's a lot of insecurity in the scene, and people arguing about, I was the first to take a Boba Fett head and put it on a Buddha. Well, if you were to come here to my warehouse, you'll see in my collection I have, Star Wars Buddhas from 20 different artists. It's just the easiest thing. They're Buddha statues just everywhere, and then taking a head and put, it's just the easiest thing to mix and match. And there were artists that would fight about that. That this is my idea, and it's like, well, you're both stealing from pop culture. Like, it's not yours. Like, and so now everyone gets along a whole lot better, and it's fun to actually see multiple artists tackle the same subject matter, and you can sort of notice the difference in their work. Because when the Sucklord was doing it, he was sort of the only one for until about 2010, when Killer Bootlegs and Healy made. Both of them were active, making their own stuff, but 2010 was about when they started putting out their own stuff. And Dollar Slice has come up with this wave theory, which I need to get on paper. Like the Sucklord was the first wave, and Healy and Killer Bootlegs was number 2, and he said that he's part of 3 with another group of however many artists. But there was a time where they were all threatened by each other. And there was a time where people thought that Killer Bootlegs was, this copycat, because, only the Sucklord, of course, could make a resin action figure. But now it's so diverse, and everyone has their own unique style. The the best thing any artist could hope for is, is to have a unique voice and to be able to see their work from across the room and say, oh, that looks like a Suckler piece. That looks like a Dollar Slice piece. That looks like a Killer Bootlegs piece. And that's starting to happen. It's not like you're looking at the work and it's indistinguishable from one another. So, like I said, exciting times.
So you alluded to it just a moment ago when you mentioned your personal collection, and as this isn't a podcast about collecting, and we are all about collecting culture, obviously. The first thing that we ask all of our guests before we kind of get started is, what are you currently collecting?
Wow, that's a problem.
It usually is for our guests.
Yeah,
it's a common problem.
Right. I'm a strong advocate that, collecting is a disease. I am particularly afflicted, and I am also a enabler. So thank you, and I'm sorry. Yeah, collecting I've always collected stuff from an early age. I've cycled through lots of different types of collecting as I'm hitting middle age. And watching prices for things like Michael Jordan rookies that are perfectly graded PSA 10 Michael Jordan rookies selling for $700,000. Not that mine that I bought for $3 in 1986 was probably a 10, because that's very rare. But it could have been an 8 or 9, and those are still 50 grand. I'm going through this period right now of, it's not really like FOMO. It's like fear of missing out. It's just like, I missed out. And so, and then I had this other problem. Sorry to go off on a tangent, but I've had this other problem where, as I've gone through these stages, I've usually eradicated everything because I just had enough. And I'm learning now that as I go through these stages, to just keep something for nostalgia's sake, right? Keep a token of it. My wife was collecting when we were in the distribution business. She was collecting handmade plush food, and she had curated a plush food show, and she'd been featured in the newspaper and all that kind of stuff. And then she kind of got over it. And then we did a show recently where she sold off her collection, but I pulled out one file box. I said, just fill this one box with your 10 favorite pieces. I totally get you don't want to own 300 pieces of plush food. Got it. Let's keep 10 pieces, right? Something to show your kids. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, All right. So back to your actual question. I think primarily I am an art collector, and with a focus on Star Wars. So I think I'm a Star Wars art collector. And I think everything is sort of in service of that. And the handmade resin action figures are generally an offshoot of that. I do also have a book problem, because as a collector, there are entire genres of things that I do not want to collect or can't collect, but having the book about it sort of fills that need of not having to own 1,000 pieces of paper in a box or a drawer. Movie posters is a big problem, right? I don't collect Mondo prints or movie posters, or I have a few, but I know people who have flat files.
Oh yeah,
with thousands. It's like, here's my poster collection. It's just in these drawers. Right?
Yeah,
and
and that's a tough one. It's a tough one to display. And I know a personal friend of mine is a poster collector, and he has one room in his house that is adorned with posters, and then he's left with the the tiresome task of switching them out from time to time. because he has so many that just live in a flat file.
It's terrible, and archival framing is very expensive. And usually the framing is more expensive than the poster or the print. Like if you have a print that's worth $5,000 or $10,000, again, you're going to blow $500 on, a linen, backer with a Japanese hinge and a, UV archival glass, or whatever it is. Like putting it up on the wall in bad material is going to turn it yellow and brown in 10 years, and the fluorescent lights or the light from outdoors is going to fade it. And that was my problem with movie posters. And then if you want to, it's not supposed to touch the glass to be archival. That means you need a mat around it, and then that makes it bigger, and it goes oversized, and then so it's like, I know these people. I have 1,000 posters that are all worth somewhere between $25 and $100. That's great. Like so my point is, I'd rather have the book.
Yeah. For something like that, absolutely.
I love it when there's a book of a designer who's, their whole career is in there. I have poster books on different genres. It could be like World War I movies or blaxploitation movies, or whatever kind of cinema, or it could be designers, or it could be actors. They just keep coming out, and it's great. I don't have to buy the prints or the posters. I just buy the books. But now the books are a problem. So, but in a way, they are art books. So that is sort of in service of the art. So everything, I guess, boils down to the art. And art is what attracted me originally to Wacky Packages, Mars Attack, and Garbage Pail Kids. And searching for Star Wars references in all of those series just got me back into Garbage Pail Kids and Wacky Packages. So now, like middle-aged, and I'm like a non-sport card collector. It's like really weird. Like, I don't know. So yeah, collecting, big problem.
So where did the idea for DKE Toys come from?
I incorporated in, I think, 1999 or 2000, and I started to do a lot of different things. And I'd gone to film school, and I'd started to do some production work, and I started to do a little wholesale, and I started to do, and the lawyer would ask, like, why are you starting the corporation? Like, you have to state what your business is. I'm like, I don't know, I want to be able to do anything. And then he just wrote, like, anything legal in the state of California. I'm like, perfect. That's great. And it just, as I went and rebought my Star Wars Kenner action figures, when I was like, maybe like 18, 19, 20, is when I got a collection, and I just started gravitating back towards those. And then I would buy other collections and then start to sell them. And I could talk about this, the origin story for hours, but basically, out of all the things that I was doing, this is the one thing that just kept throwing money at me. It was like, I don't want to say it was easy. It was a job, but I don't know. It was just, of all other things that I was trying to do, this is the one thing that came easy to me. It was simple. There were people just ready. Like, if you had something someone wanted, they would just throw money at you. And back then it was just, in the 90s, early 2000s, those are just magical time. Like, toy business was kind of pre-eBay, or eBay was just starting, and eBay sort of took, I don't know, they sort of chopped it off at its knees a little bit, and ultimately good. Ultimately, like, we all had access to more stuff, and most of those gatekeepers went away, and prices changed dramatically. Things that people thought were rare just started showing up everywhere, and other things, were people realize are really hard to get. So I basically just started trying to pay for my own habit, and that sort of grew. And I realized early on that I did not want to sell stuff at retail. Selling some stuff at a convention and having to deal with individual customers and mail order, and at the time taking out ads or starting a website, that just seemed horrible to me. So I just gravitated towards wholesale, and I did a lot of closeouts and a lot of selling on consignment at different shops. And then about 2005, designer toys that's when it exploded. And I was sort of there, not at the very beginning, but I started to meet people, and I just became a distributor. I was already selling stuff wholesale. I was already familiar with the language of selling something to a retailer. And, before you know it, a dozen years later, we were representing 500 companies. And that's probably when I had it. And I sold the business to Dispersed. Dispersed took over the wholesale, my warehouse, the employees, and the wholesale business. I'm still DKE Toys. I just don't wholesale designer toys anymore. But what happened gradually over the years at the conventions was it got harder to get a small manufacturer to make me something really good to sell at the show to try and recoup my cost. Because even though the great thing about designer vinyl was that the editions could be small, but small is still 500 pieces or 100 pieces, as opposed to what was 10,000 pieces before, or 100,000. Right? That's why designer vinyl took off, because someone with a modest amount of money could make 500 pieces in China. Whereas doing that before was a little more difficult. But still, for a convention, trying to get someone to make me something good, one of our companies that we represented, when they could just sell it themselves at full price, it just got difficult. But what was easy to do is get these resin makers to make me action figures and editions of 10 or 20 or 50, because they made them all here by hand in their garage. And there was one year we showed up at Comic-Con, and like every year, it just sort of transitioned. The number of vinyl toys just went away. One year it was half and half, and then one year there was like only one vinyl toy, and then the next year it was only action figure. And I remember the Wednesday night of San Diego Comic-Con, and I didn't understand what was happening. It just, everyone was at our booth, and we sold everything that we had. And I was like, holy shit. We have something here. The world is telling me something. And then I had to have my wife go to the warehouse and dig up some old stock and drive it down to San Diego because I had nothing to sell. So I was supposed to retire, but instead I became a retailer on the convention circuit. That's not what I envisioned for my life. And selling at retail, which was not something I ever thought I would do. And then pandemic hit, and I did the shows because I didn't want to sell online. I didn't want to pack hundreds of boxes. I wanted to show up at the show with what I had to sell, do a lot of business in a short amount of time, and then chill. But then pandemic hit, and then we started a website. And then now I'm an online retailer. What the fuck?
Well, I mean, the pandemic has forced people to be nimble, right? If nothing else, it's one of those situations where, unfortunately, outside of the public health issues, that a pandemic is first and foremost responsible for, but it forces people to be industrious. Right, and forces people to maybe flex what they outside of what they wanted to operate as.
Indeed, and once the conventions were canceled, I think it was my wife's idea. She just told everyone we're gonna set up the booth in the warehouse, and Dov's gonna be live on Zoom. Like, okay, so that first year for San Diego, which didn't happen. What year was that? San Diego was July 2020, right?
Yeah.
I was in that booth live on Zoom for 5 days. Like,
I'm going to be honest. That's how we found out about DKE Toys was because of that live stream.
right. And so, like, the hours of the show were like Wednesday night from 5:30 to 9. I was in the booth from 5:30 to 9. And then on Thursday, I was there from 10 to 7, like every day. And then we started to do interviews and contests and giveaways. And then people just started watching and like sitting there for 5 days, just watching me like talk, which is uncomfortable. But that's good that they're there. And then the more I talked about shit, like the more they bought stuff. And it was weird. And we sold more than we'd ever sold at a convention.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
What if the key to a successful marriage was a deadly secret? Hulu presents Deep Water, starring Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas. As people around them begin to mysteriously disappear, questions arise, and their marriage is pushed to the brink when Vic becomes the prime suspect in the death of one of his wife's lovers. Who do you believe in the game of love? Deep Water premieres only on Hulu this Friday. Rated R.
And now, back to the show.
Taking a step back, you mentioned that you've now been doing this for so long where you've seen kind of these different phases, right? So when you started, it was in that pre-eBay world where you could still find cool stuff at maybe a thrift store, a flea market, a pawn shop. And now, you've gone through all of that straight through to the pandemic era, where we've all fully embraced this kind of virtual world that we live in. How has the art toy community changed over the years? What are some of the changes that you've seen?
I think the initial change, what attracted me to art toys in the beginning was when I was in college. I had a bunch of Frank Kozik posters on my wall. And around early 2000s, he started making toys. And when I saw those toys, I saw something that wasn't licensed. It wasn't a brand. It was the embodiment of this person's art in the 3D form. But not an expensive sculpture, one-of-a-kind sculpture. It was art as a toy. And out of that, a community developed of people who were interested in the form of toys, but just based on their aesthetic. And with I think, a deeply rooted interest in who the creator was. And we all know George Lucas is the creator of Star Wars, but when I buy a Star Wars action figure, it doesn't have really a name of the sculptor, doesn't have the name of a designer generally. It's generally a commodity. It's something that is made by a licensee to sell as many units as they can. And I started to feel like there was no real soul there. And if I know you guys are action figure collectors, you know that a company is going to make a line of toys and they're going to push it until it stops selling. And when it stops selling, the licensee is going to either hand the license to someone else, or the licensor is going to hand it to someone else, or the licensee is going to figure out a new scale and a new way to sell you the same thing again, because that's their business. It's not like they get to the end of the Star Wars line, say, we've made every figure, okay, we're done. It's like, well, here's Darth Vader that's clear, and here's the one with the cloth cape, and here's the one with the light up lightsaber, and the one with the helmet cut off. And I had all those figures. I was collecting. I had all my vintage loose figures. I had sold off my carded collection years earlier and put a down payment on a house. And I still had the Power of the Force 2 line that was, and I was buying 2 of everything through, I don't know, probably about episode 2. My brain started to explode. But then I saw a photo of a guy's collection. I assume he was a guy. And he had every single figure loose, which is what I wanted, like in a case, like, 1,000 of them.
Yeah.
And it looked like shit. And I was like, I don't want this for myself. And I sold them all. And when I got an art toy from either an artist that I liked that created something, or I saw something that moved me in a 3D form, I think there's a lot of people that just started to feel that way. And I think through the years that audience grew. I think about 2008, 2009, it started to plateau when, a lot of the kind of fair weather fans left. But I think it sort of stayed at that plateau for quite a while. And now I think there's it's sort of like separated into little conclaves of, like, there's us over here with these artists that are doing resin action figures. And there's a lot of artists that have gone into like the monster and Japanese kaiju, Sofubi world. And the artists who were really popular sort of started to sell their own stuff directly. And a lot of the stores that were sort of on the front lines of this went out of business. And that's sort of when I realized that, like, I had to get out of the distribution business, because I never went to business school. I had pushed it as far as I could, with me and a 10,000 square foot warehouse and all the people we were representing. But I did not have the skills to take it to the next level. I was going to hire a manager that was going to manage more employees and have salespeople. And Scott from Dispersed, he wasn't Dispersed at the time, but Scott Kinsley, who took it over, had those tools. Like, I walked through the warehouse and like my mind was like melting, and he walked through the warehouse and this was a crazy puzzle that, he's like, oh, we can fix this, and we can do this and organize this way, and awesome. But then, like, when it came to talking to an artist, it's like, hey, Dov, call that guy and see if they can make that toy, right? So it's like, so it was a sort of a perfect fit. So, I spent several years working for them and in that transition, and their business has changed. Like, I could not have sold to Hot Topic or GameStop or Target or Walmart. Nobody in the designer toy world wanted their stuff in any of those places. And now it's the goal. Like, now it is it's just the market has changed. And the buyers for those stores are already attuned to what a designer toy is.
Mm-hmm.
But 10 years ago, they're like, what is this? This isn't Iron Man. This isn't Spider-Man. Like, I don't know what this is. Like, but now getting an artist to create something that has their name on it and their style, even if it's of something of pop culture, is something that a lot more people understand. But when I was doing it, it was, I guess, the people always at the front of the pack have like the largest headwind, that kind of theory. But I think now everyone, I think in general, like, women understood, a designer more from clothing lines, and this is a purse by this designer and that.
Well, fashion and I think that
at
the
a
fashion industry, for sure.
like that was understood, and maybe there were fewer men that were attuned to that. I don't know, but and then you would sort of see like what Target was doing. Target was working with a designer and creating, towels and bed sheets and housewares and things, all based on one designer's work. And that's sort of like now the idea of a designer sort of understood by most people, I think. And the idea that there's a person whose job it is to express themselves in a 3D form, what we call a toy, but it's not always a toy. I mean, that's Frank Kozik told me. He said that every art form has had a pop culture renaissance, and you can find that time for film or poetry or expressionist art, whatever. There was a time, and he said this time now is 3D toy art or 3D. It's sort of like an artist makes a print and makes 100 prints of something and signs them. Well, here's like a 3D print in a way. Right? Here's either someone's character that they painted is now, and now there's a 3D version of it. And it's not always sculpted by them, but it is a design of theirs. And you walk into people's homes and they might not collect toys, but they have this one, you'll see they have a bear brick in the corner. That sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think too, like Dave, I know a lot of the stuff that that you kind of gravitate towards. Whether it was the Disney Vinylmations or some of the artist the special artist editions of like the Funko Pops, like that mentality, that artist fingerprint mentality has started to permeate into mainstream toys and collectibles as well.
Yeah, for sure. Tell us a little bit about DKECON on its own and kind of what the aim is for DKECON.
Well, starting on March 25th, and for 3 days, I will have the booth set up here in the warehouse. The web store will also go live. There, if you go to DKEToys.com and click the shop link, there are a selection of hundreds of handmade toys available all the time. But at noon Pacific on March 25th, we'll have close to 40 new exclusives that will be available for sale starting that day and until they're gone. It's usually limit one per person on the first day, and then by Saturday we remove that. You buy whatever you want. But this virtual show basically was born out of pandemic, and we just decided that it did so well that why not just have one virtual show every year? And our schedule was so tight that we'd have nothing in the first half of the year, and then it would be San Diego, New York Comic Con, and Designer Con all within 5 months. It was hard on the artists, it's hard on the pocketbook of the collectors, so we decided to skip New York and do a virtual show in March, and that way we're doing 3 shows a year. It's one every 4 months. And at least this one, we don't have to pack up the truck and travel anywhere. And it hits a entirely different crowd, like people who all over the world who couldn't go to a show. And not only that, when we show up at a show, it's after our online stuff, all of our stuff has gone for sale online already, which is a different model as well. We spent 2 years during pandemic cultivating this audience and this crowd of people all over the world. And I just thought it would be so fucked up to all of a sudden say, too bad, go buy a ticket, fly to San Diego and buy your stuff. Or, I don't know, it felt wrong. So everything now for San Diego and Designer Con goes on sale the week before. And then we show up at the show just to do outreach and sell stuff in person. And we've increased the edition sizes and gotten artists to make more stuff so that we try to have more stuff for the show. But it is possible that some stuff sells out online and doesn't make it to the show.
So how does an artist that may be just getting started get their work showcased with DKE?
Just get in touch. I usually just need to talk to you on the phone. Tell them sort of what the parameters are that we work in, and if you can make something that fall into those parameters, we're happy to work with you. The scene right now is super diverse, and there are people whose work looks like folk art, and there are people whose work looks so good and so meticulous that if you would put it on a shelf in a store, you would think that it came from China. And then there's people whose paint jobs go so far beyond that, into the scale of like crazy, like statue and model building and that kind of stuff. So, as long as it sort of like fits our, I don't want to call it a formula because, we are mainly selling action figures, so I guess that is a formula. Action figure is generally a card back with a figure in a blister, and that's the format that seems to work. People call me and say, like, hey, I want to do this. One guy wanted to make, from recollection, it just blew our minds. He made the card back was porcelain, the figure was porcelain, and the blister was glass.
Whoa.
And he made a Princess Leia, and it just said Princess on it. And it's like we all saw this, and it was like we had this like 2001 moment, like looking at the monolith. It was like, the music started. It's like, what is this? This is unbelievable. And, this guy works in porcelain. And you should check him out online. It's on Recollection, I believe. And he's making a Darth Vader that is black porcelain for this show. And they're expensive. I think he only made 10, 12 pieces or $300. But it's like, this is what an action figure, his concept was this was what an action figure would look like, several hundred years ago or in France in the Renaissance or whatever. And all of these artists have these skills, and they're just coming to this medium and just doing what they can do. Because if you think about all of the things that are necessary to do this job, there's only a handful of people that can do them all. Most people can't sculpt. And if you're a sculptor, you might not be able to paint a card back. Maybe you can do some graphic design. There are a few unicorns out there that can literally do everything. But most people are getting help on something. Most artists are getting another, designer to do their card, or getting an artist to paint a picture on the card that they design, or asking someone to sculpt something, or maybe they don't cast or paint their figures. There's just, at the core of it, this is a conceptual art form. And there are a few guys out there who get shit from the other artists who really don't sculpt, don't cast, don't paint, don't design cards, but they come up with the concept and they sort of direct it and orchestrate it and get it all done. And I think of one artist in particular whose work it's immaculate, and it sells fantastically well. And, people give him shit, but at the end of the day, when George Lucas was on the set of Star Wars, like, he didn't do the wardrobe. He didn't do, he wasn't hanging lights. He didn't edit the film. It's like, there are very few people that can do all of those things in any art form. So it just, if the concept is strong, I think that's all that counts. Like, and I've seen, if you look at our website, you'll see a lot of executions that are substandard, but the concept is strong, and then it sells out because it's just, I don't know how to explain it. You just see it, and it's like, oh, that's amazing. Why didn't I think of that? And then you buy it, and then I don't know. There's some cattiness with the other artists. I think they're just pissed they didn't come up with the idea.
So speaking of all these ideas and the countless projects that you've seen kind of come across your plate over the years, do you have a favorite? Was there one that was like the project you were most proud of?
I don't think so. I think they're sort of all my children. I know how I felt when I saw the Sucklord's Gay Empire figure in 2005. right? I mean, there was a pink stormtrooper, said Homo Trooper on it, the Time for War, and there was a pink stormtrooper with a big crotch, right? And I was like, wow, like that. I mean, it was sort of firing on all cylinders, right? Because it was an art toy. It drew on popular culture. It was a political statement. It sort of had that adbustery, wacky package, parody quality to it. It just, and he still makes gay empires to this day, and they still sell. It's like, it's ever present. And that was sort of an epiphany moment when I saw that. Like, and it sort of like hit me over the head. Like, this is, because this was an offshoot of like the designer toy scene. And, we sold his figures for him early on, and I don't know, we just sort of stuck with that. And I think that's that's what got me into it. But there are so many examples. We're working on a book now of Star Wars inspired resin action figures, and it's I think all I can do is put out like a 400 or 500 page book and cram everything in there, because I can't decide like like this should be in and this shouldn't.
So was the first book primarily just Boba Fett figures, and then books, the subsequent books will be other characters?
There will be a lot of Boba Fetts, but Boba Fett is so easy to parody. In every show, out of 30, 40 exclusives, there's always 5, 6 Boba Fetts maybe. And they continue to sell well. And every time someone comes up with a new concept that no one has thought of before, and everyone's like, fuck, I should have thought of that. Like, it's unbelievable. It's getting kind of old, but it's like becoming, it's kind of when a joke just gets like, it gets stupid after a while, and then you just keep saying it and you keep saying it and you keep saying it, and then it just sort of becomes part of you, and then you just go back to laughing at it. Like,
well, we asked this question to John to
Dollar Slice.
Yeah. Why do you think Boba Fett is like the character that
is like the calling card for the community?
Yeah.
Well, Boba Fett was mysterious, right? Boba Fett had a very few lines. He was a bounty hunter. He looked rad, and there was all sorts of speculation. And there was like, I never read the books. There's one line in the book about being a Mandalorian, and just that just sort of created this idea that there could be more of these. Like, what is the story there? I mean, it is unfortunate that Boba Fett, who was this minor character, ended up being taken because he was popular and being the basis for all the clones and all of the storyline based on this one random character. I mean, just think, what if Dengar had been the most popular? Right? And then all of episode 1, 2, and 3 would have been about Dengar and Dengar's son, and all of the clones were like spawn of Dengar, and it's like,
I would have much preferred like Zuckuss or a Forlom, right? Like there's just clones of like weird like green brain aliens.
I'm trying to be ridiculous on purpose, but you understand, like, like the opportunism.
Yeah, no, you're right.
The opportunism there. The toy was also very cool, and there was always the issue about the the rocket firing, and that also created some mystery. I'm sure other people could pinpoint other reasons why it's cool. And I think that you can also see now that they're explaining everything about Boba Fett, and you're watching him get fat and old, and then the mystique is sort of not there anymore. So it's like, what was cool about him has sort of been ruined, for financial reasons and in service of creating content, for fans to, go crazy over. So
it all goes back to that. I think it was Patton Oswalt that made the joke in one of either a stand up or a show that he was on. But he said it was something about the it's like going to an ice cream parlor and ordering ice cream, but instead of just getting ice cream, they teach you how to make your own ice cream. And then you have to make your own ice cream before you can get your ice cream. He's like, no, I just came here for my ice cream. I don't need to know how it was made.
Right.
I don't want to be part of making it. I just want some vanilla soft serve and a cone.
Right.
Please.
Yeah, you just want to get in your car and step on the gas and have it go. Like, you don't need a theory of internal combustion. And but the problem is then you run out of stories to tell.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, there are certain characters that I think, in this is a much larger conversation, but I think in the Star Wars canon, like the official canon, I think there are characters that they'll probably maybe leave alone, and not give us like full backstories on, like maybe somebody like Yoda. But it's just they already, with the prequels, they already laid the groundwork to kind of flesh out Boba Fett, and if you watched the Clone Wars cartoon, you got to see him kind of operate as this vengeful little prick of a kid, that just wanted to kill Mace Windu for decapitating his father, so I think with him, maybe some of the mystique, well, not maybe, definitely some of the mystique has been eliminated, for the indoctrined fans, but to your point, I think going back to that original Kenner toy, with the rocket firing action, and I'm stealing Dave's very funny point from our episode with Dollar Slice bootlegs, but like a toy that could potentially kill you, like it was
a meme, a toy that will maim you,
right?
Like all of those things, I think are contributing factors, and it's interesting to hear how now this is the second time we've asked this question. We might have to add it to our list of like reoccurring questions.
This might be like, although now I am very, in a comedic sense, interested in the Book of Dengar.
I mean, look, you can keep, in service of fans, you can keep doing this forever, and I'm sure they will, and I'm sure that's why George Lucas sold it to Disney so they could keep it going forever, because it didn't sound like something he wanted to do. And as long as the fans enjoy it, they'll keep making it. And when the fans are like, that's enough, then they'll stop, or it'll become, more sporadic. I personally feel I'm in a good place now with Star Wars. There was a time after the prequels that it was sort of like a dark time for me when I was like, like Star Wars, like there was only 2.5 good movies, and then there was this other stuff, and I just, and the way I justify it, the way I can sleep at night, is I really just view Star Wars Empire and Jedi as canon. And everything else is fan fiction. Everything else is just someone else's take on it, someone else's interpretation. And even though George made the first 3 movies, it was so long in the future. He was not the same person that he was when he was the age that he made Star Wars. Motivations were different. And I feel like that was like a different person who made those. And if you look at something that's been around for 75 years, like Batman, everyone has something Batman they like. Most people, right? Whether it was a movie or the TV show or a cartoon or a comic or a toy or the breakfast cereal or a video game or whatever, there's something Batman that people usually gravitate toward. But I don't have to say, if someone says, are you a Batman fan? Say, sure, but that does not imply that I need to love 75 years of what is probably mostly garbage.
Yeah, you love the parts of Batman that you love, and that's and I think that goes for most characters in pop culture, that have that sort of depth, whether it's a horror movie slasher icon that's, 9 movies deep, like a Jason Voorhees or even a Michael Myers. You might love Halloween, the first one, but you don't like any of the sequels, or you like Halloween Part 3 because it's not the Michael Myers movie.
I get to pick and choose.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of fight with fans, like, you're not a fan, you don't like these, or I hate this whole thing, or Star Wars is taking a dump, or whatever. It's like, no. My kids who are 8 and 5, they got to watch Star Wars when they were 5. And my son who's 8 now, thinks that Star Wars and Empire and Jedi are kind of boring. And he thinks that 1, 2, and 3 are action-packed and crazy and likes those the best.
Yeah, I have a 6-year-old, and she's got a life-size, one of those wall vinyl decals of Rey. She loves the sequel trilogy. She loves those characters. She loves the animated content. And, she's watched the original Star Wars films and the prequels, and she appreciates them as being part of the story. But when she wants to watch Star Wars, it's usually, something with The Mandalorian or something, with Rey. She wants to watch the newer content. And, there shouldn't be any...
totally fine. You get,
Yep.
It's like, I can be a fan.
Gatekeeping.
Yeah, I can be a fan. I can pick and choose. And it's going to get to the point that there's so much content that no one's going to like it all. And you don't have to like it all. And you can still be a fan. But for me, if I just pretend that the original trilogy is it, and then just sort of imagine what everything else could be, then it's still very interesting to me. Because as soon as you explain Boba Fett, it just loses a little bit of its luster. But if I just think of that as oh, this is Disney's take on it, right? Remember, they could reboot all of this shit. Star Wars is going to be 50 years old soon.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
They could start from scratch. I don't know what else they're going to do. I know they have these huge plans that got scrapped and whatever. It's they could figure out ways to tell the whole story all over again with new actors. What a shitstorm that's going to be. It's I'll be 80 years old. It's well, when I was younger and I used to see Star Wars in the theater. It's okay, Grandpa.
That's not my Darth Vader.
Yeah, exactly. So, whatever. These are first world problems.
Well, with that, I think it's time to head into some Q&A. This segment is brought to you by our friends at Chubsy Wubsy Toys. A traditional mom-and-pop toy store in Little Falls, New Jersey, Chubsy Wubsy Toys brings you the best new toys from the brands you love without the hassle of pounding the pavement searching for them at larger retail stores. Visit them in person at 106 Main Street in Little Falls, New Jersey, or online at chubsywubsy.com. That's CHUBZYWUBZZY.com. And tell them Adventures in Collecting sent you. So we posted that you were going to be on the podcast, and we asked if the community had some questions, and we do have a couple of, or I should say, we have a few questions for you. 2 of which come from specific people, and then one we had a couple people ask the same question. So can't give any credit to one of them. But Dave, do you want to go ahead with the first one?
I would love to. At Behind the Bootleg asks, what is one of the hardest decisions you've had to make regarding a show?
I guess the hardest decision is whether to do it or not. Right?
That's fair.
It's whether you're going to commit, however much it costs. $10,000. Having all of this stuff created, put it in a van, advertise it, drive it there, set it up, and just pray that people show up. I talk to a lot of artists who are business people or artists who are trying to do business, and my advice to them is usually like let the marketplace dictate what you do. You don't have to, people look at a toy, they're like, how much should I charge for this? It's like, well, just start at the bottom. And then when you can't make them fast enough, then you raise your prices. So I've tried the resin action figures at mainstream toy shows, and without a super sophisticated audience, it just doesn't work. San Diego Comic-Con is the hub of comics, animation, toys, movies, video game. And the people who work for all of those companies come and buy from us. But the kid who's going to a convention to buy his $10 Funko Pop and get an autograph from this person and their free poster is not going to buy a $50 or $100 handmade signed piece of art, basically. And so there's only certain venues that it actually works in. And there is some value to going to certain shows for outreach, to be on the front lines and explain to people what it is. But our booth usually looks like a little art show, like a little mini museum, sort of. And more often than not, someone will just come up, see something, laugh at it, take the photo, and then walk away. And that's great. Love it when people do that. People say, can we take photos? Of course. But, at the end of the day, we do need to eat. So we want people to buy stuff. So that's always the hardest decision, is where to invest the money to, make the biggest impact. And I think we've settled on something that works, but I'm not too adventurous. I would say that, like, business-wise, I'm pretty conservative. It took a pandemic to make me an online retailer, right? It took the seeing the demand of the audience at San Diego for me to migrate to an exclusive action figure, lineup. So I'm just sort of like, just following what where the universe is sort of leading me, I guess. Because if everyone stopped buying resin action figures, like, I'm not going to keep doing it and banging my head against the wall. I love it. But I would just try and find the next thing that I loved, I guess.
All right. So outside of the medium of toys, what artists do you admire?
That's a rough question. We could talk an hour just on that. But I'm always discovering new people. And then once I discover them, I try to get them to make action figures. So that is
awesome, actually.
Yeah, that rules.
So that is, sort of an interesting phenomenon. Like, there are no DKE branded action figures. The majority of the releases that we release are toys made by artists who make resin action figures and deliver finished product to us. But when I meet an artist that I like, I can sort of help them facilitate making an action figure for an artist who would never, ever work in that medium. So when you see toys by Frank Kozik, Ron English, Scott C., Jim LaFood, I could go on down the list, Alex Gross, like Luke Chu, we've helped all of those people get those action figures to market.
Have you ever heard of, there's this artist that I absolutely adore on Instagram. His handle is @AlecWithPen.
No.
He does these really, really absurd, almost like I don't know how to describe them. They're so strange and so fun and dark. But like seeing some of the stuff that I've seen, at on the DKE showcase, I just see his stuff, and hearing you say that, like, it would be the one character that he kind of draws in all of his work, which I believe is sort of a caricature of himself in a way.
I see it now, like missing the eye and
yeah. Yeah, like it could be very toyetic.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, like I discover someone like this, and then if I can't produce it, then sometimes I can put them together with someone who can. So there's another guy, if you look up on Instagram, his name is Paul Rentler, and he's sort of like a collage artist, and it's graphic design. There was a point in his career where he was cutting and pasting, but now
Oh yeah, I see it.
It's all digital. And so he created the card back and, sort of created, if you go through his feed, you'll see these busts of Star Wars characters, like a Tusken Raider and Darth Vader. And so I put him together with a resin toy artist. And so they collaborated and with Titty Beans Toys in Australia. And he created the figure, he sculpted it, painted it, and Paul created the card, and they've sort of like made this collaboration, and it's coming out for this DKECON in March.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, I love this. This art is gorgeous.
And he does stickers and zines, and like it's out of control. Like it's just
Ephemera Eye Wash.
That's the new zine he just released. Yeah,
that's awesome. All right, last question in the Q&A. Friend of the pod, we've mentioned him before, at Dollar Slice Bootlegs. He asks, what does the atom bomb art taste like?
Right. That's a little inside baseball, I think, for most people listening. What John knows that people listening probably don't know is that I own the original atom bomb art from first series of Garbage Pail Kids. And John has come over to the house and drooled over it in the past. So it's a silly question and doesn't require an answer, but
he was asking you a question so that you could flex with the fact that you have that.
Exactly, which I don't normally do that kind of thing. So, and I definitely don't go around licking art.
Nor do you condone the licking of art.
And maybe that's an art form in and of itself, but not for me.
I mean, the snozberries taste like snozberries, so...
We now have a new disclaimer. Do not lick art.
Oh, man. Well, with that, you have survived the Q&A, so congratulations.
Wow.
And that leads us to our final question. Dave, would you like to fulfill your role as this pod's James Limpton and ask the final question?
I sure would. So our final question that we ask to all of our guests: what's your favorite and or strangest piece in your collection? It can be one of each, or it can be both.
Wow. I think the strangest thing, it's more of a category. And I have another Instagram, in addition to at DKE Toys on Instagram, where you should follow me if you care about resin action figures. But my other account is called at bootleg_GPK. And it showcases my collection of every sort of fan-made, artist-made, and bootleg Garbage Pail Kid. And they range from like some amazing artists who used to do Garbage Pail Kids and now do their own stuff. Mark Pingatore is a good example, who has done Horrible Kids, all the horror icons, and he's done a series of Star Wars and a series of Turtles and a series of Thundercats and He-Man and you name it. And he releases packs of cards and boxes and sets and uncut sheets and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the sort of finding Garbage Pail Kid references out in the world. For some reason, there's a theme of tattoo artists in their business cards. I must have at least 20 different business cards from tattoo artists who all used Garbage Pail Kid themes in the way they advertise their businesses. To other, it's just sort of meta. It's just weird. It's like Garbage Pail Kids was originally a Wacky Package parody of a Cabbage Patch Doll. And then now people are parodying the parody. And the most recent set I got in the mail is called Fentanyl Patch Kids. And it's like just the most fucked up images I've ever seen. And so it starts in the early 80s with the direct ripoffs, trash can tots and trash can kids and garbage can kids, or whatever, every conceivable iteration, from an actual set of cards to a skateboard company, fucked up blind kids, came out in 1988 with those 4 skaters who are now a big deal. And it just keeps going, and I have thousands of cards and the more ridiculous, the more absurdly or horribly done, the more I like it, if that makes sense. Not that someone's making it bad on purpose. They're just people who are doing the best they can, and they think it's good enough to make a sticker or a card or a postcard or whatever and put it out there. And I'm stupid enough to buy it. What can I say? So if you go through the feed, you'll just start seeing there's breweries that are now making their own custom labels that have GPK themes. Like it's just exploding, and I'm caring less and less about what Topps is doing. I get the new sets; they're cheap. They come out like $10-$20. Like you get the new set of cards. Okay, cool. It's fine. They do their online releases. Okay, cool. I'm trying to keep up, but that's not exciting to me. It's always the artist, the fan, the creator who's taking the theme, twisting it, turning on its head, doing something that is not approved, sometimes completely offensive. And that's sort of where it's at for me.
Well, I mean, that's the in the spirit of Garbage Pail Kids. They were always offensive. I mean, many of them were offensive.
They were, but everything that was offensive is not offensive anymore. I walk into the bank and they're playing Judas Priest.
This is true.
And I'm like, my wife looked at me and like, are they really playing Judas Priest in the bank? It's like, breaking the law. It's like, what the fuck is what Twilight Zone have I stepped into that, this is like, it's just part of the culture and no one's bothered by it. No one thinks that their kid is like, I mean, I'm sure there's someone who still thinks, rock and roll is the devil's music, but do you know what I mean? It's just part of the culture. And like
we've developed culturally to be a little more a little less sensitive to things.
It's like, is Garbage Pail Kid really going to hurt a kid? I don't. The people buying Garbage Pail Kids are not kids. They're they're like 50-year-old adults.
Yeah, oftentimes when I'm going, I
had the cards when I was a kid.
And I was gonna say when I go to Walmart and Target, and I walk through the collectible section and the toy section, and my daughter's with me, she goes right past the Garbage Pail because now there's Garbage Pail Kids toys. There's like pullback racers and little like minifigures, and they're really cool. They look like 3D expressions of the cards. I mean, it's like the characters are there, the sculpts are great. She walks right by. Couldn't care less.
There's no nostalgia there. I was, we were on a road trip and we stopped in a little roadside market, and my kid says to me, "Hey, Dad, did you see the Garbage Pail Kid little minifigures?" And I looked at it like, "Oh yeah, I got those." And then, it's like, I don't like, those were made for me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, I agree with you. Like, kids, they don't care.
Before we let you go, can you just remind everybody one more time where can we find out about DKE Toys on the internet, and remind us again when DKECON is starting?
We are at DKE Toys on everything, but everything is focused on Instagram. So if you follow us on Instagram, it does post to Twitter and to Facebook and all that stuff, but Instagram's sort of like where the action is and where all the announcements are. If you go to DKEToys.com, click on the store link, you can see all of the crazy creations of all of the artists that are out there. And if you click on the DKECON link, by the time this is up, the press release for the new show will be there, and it'll have links to the store, links to the Zoom interview list and schedule for all the days, and every single question that you have about DKECON will be answered on that page. And so just stay tuned, log in, give us a follow, and if you're into action figures but have not ventured into this genre before, it's pretty fascinating, and there's generally something for everyone. It does cater more to 3 3/4 inch and more to Star Wars references than other genres, but I'm starting to see a lot of people's collections, people who are just action figures, and generally speaking, there's always 1 or 2 resin pieces just sort of like hiding in the corner. It's like, oh, I really don't collect these, but I couldn't resist this one, that kind of thing. So I'm starting to see that a lot.
Dov, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and we'll have to have you back on maybe in time for the next DKECon.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me and helping spread the word. I really appreciate all you guys do.
Thank you, dear listener, for hanging out with us today. Subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen, and then tell your friends to do it. Thanks also to Joe Azzari, the golden voice behind our intro. Our music is Game Boy Horror by the Zombie Dandies. Find more about them both in our show notes.
Follow us on social media at AIC_podcast on Instagram and Twitter. Stop by and say hi, show us your toy hauls, and share your toy stories. Maybe we'll talk about it in a future episode.
Don't try this at home. Void where prohibited and some assembly required. Each sold separately, not a flying toy. Consult a physician if your toy run exceeds more than 4 hours.
This has been a non-productive media presentation. Executive producer Frank Hablawi. This program and many others like it on the Non-Productive Network is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Please share it, but ask before trying to change it or sell it. For more information, visit non-productive.com.
What if the key to a successful marriage was a deadly secret? Hulu presents Deep Water, starring Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas. As people around them begin to mysteriously disappear, questions arise, and their marriage is pushed to the brink when Vic becomes the prime suspect in the death of one of his wife's lovers. Who do you believe in the game of love? Deep Water premieres only on Hulu this Friday. Rated R.